So yeah, when I come to arrange things, if we take this as being the finished track, first thing I do is I'll group up all of my individual parts into sort of kind of like categories, if you like. So I'm just going to switch to the environment page. So we've got the kick here. I'm just going to label that up as the kick. So we need that one, and we also need the guru. Oh, let me just hitting caps lock there. And also the white noise. So they're kind of our drum parts, and I'm going to bust those to... I always kind of try and keep things grouped up into sort of groups of 10. So like, if you imagine the first 9, I'm going to use as sends and returns. So then 10 is going to be my first group. So then we can double click on that and go to here. I've got a few kind of bus settings for this. This is one of the ones I've been using most often. We've got a vintage warmer as the first part of the channel. Then I've got the Power Core character plugin and a limiter just on the end, just to keep it in check. The great thing about character is I've been with many producers before that have said, wouldn't it be great if we got something called the good knob, that you sort of turn things and it makes them gooder. Well, character is kind of that plugin really, because you can isolate the sort of the individual sounds that you want, percussions or synths or whatever, and then basically just kind of turn up the goodness of it. What it is the goodness. That is exactly what it is. What it does is it kind of reads the sound that's coming into it and picks out the points at which the sound becomes most defined, and then as you turn the knob up, it increases those points. So it works differently on every instrument as well. If you put an instrument that has a frequency boost at say 1.5 kilohertz, and that's kind of where the sound is at its best, that's where character will sort of push the sound. Whereas if it's something that's got a sort of a sweet spot at around about 450 hertz, that's where character will boost it. It's a very, very clever plugin. So I'm just going to run through what I would sort of do here. I tend to use the vintage warmer kind of just as it comes, to be honest, because it's just a really good colour of sound. So I've got the drums soloed here. A bit of an overload there, hang on. Ah, you see, good old Logic. So we'll just leave that playing as is. We'll drop the vintage warmer on, and instantly you get kind of like a bottom end boost, a little bit more drive and a little bit of saturation. Just kind of like pushing the sound just a little bit more. And then we're going to turn the good knob on. I'm just going to quickly loop up the back section of this so that it's not trying to play a million things at once. Turn the character on. Now obviously the CPU that this is using is from the Power Core, so it shouldn't affect the load on the computer. I've got it set to percussion mode, which is, if you have a look in the presets, you've got all these different bass boost, bass drum, bass guitar, techno, whatever. But I'm going to go with the percussion setting on it. Let me just quickly, just to try and get rid of that message. If you do get that message popping up quite a lot, which some people do, I don't know why I am, because it is an 8-core, this one. But what you can do is you can just increase the in and out buffer size, and that normally gets rid of it for you. So I'm going to move it up to 512 samples, reinitialize the program. Just give it a second. There we go. Strings. And we're back. So, fingers crossed, that's going to stop it. So I got this set on the percussion setting, and literally all you do now is just turn the character up, and it instantly picks out one of the sort of sweetest parts of the drums and amplifies them. And the really crazy thing is, like, you put it on and you think, you know, that sounds really good. And then when you take it off afterwards, you realise kind of how dull it was sounding before. It's like so flat and lifeless without that on. It's the good knob. We're going to put that limiter back on there. Again, sometimes I'll throw a bit crusher on here as well, just to prevent any sort of clipping into the red. Put the limiter back on the end there. Logic's limiter is very, very simple to use. You just tell it what you want your maximum output level to be, and then increase the gain. And that enables you to push things a lot louder than you would be able to before. So that's my basic drum strip. The next strip we're going to look at, obviously, we need to sort of mute that off for a moment. I'm going to kind of put the, let's see, we've got that. So I'm going to put the bass onto its own bus as well. And the reason I do this is because I tend to use multiple bass tracks for a single sound. The reason for this is if you're automating a bass, if you're automating, say, the cutoff on this bass, and you want to kind of open up like this. When you want it to snap back, you tend to find that Logic lags a little bit. You like see how that kind of dropped just before the bar, even though the control data's blatantly after the bar, it actually kind of drops before, or sometimes it drops after. See? No idea why. And you tend to find it does that a lot. Not just Logic, but other software as well. It's just kind of like one of those things. It takes a certain amount of time to process that curve back down, you know, to whatever you want it to go to. So what I'll always do is you've got a little button here just next to the Add Track button, and that's an add track. Add a track with the same settings. So I'll click that there. It creates another ESM track, and then I'll throw this one onto there. That means when I want to automate this one, I can leave that open without any worry of it dropping back down again. But this one will be set on 0 cutoff, so you get a nice smooth transition. But of course, obviously, both of those basses will have to go through the same processing. So rather than waste lots and lots of plugins, you know, processing one lot of bass, I'll always just run them through a single bus, and that kind of keeps them in check. So where are we? We're looking for ESM and ESM. So we're going to run those through bus number 11, which is here at the end. Now this bus can be a mono bus, and you'll notice that I tend to run all my basses as mono, and I tend to run all my kick drums as mono, for the simple reason that because they're always going to be central in your mix anyway, there's no point in having a stereo signal. If you've got a kick drum and you've got two sides of a stereo signal playing exactly the same thing, you're going to kind of lose some of the emphasis because of the fact that the two things are playing the same sound. So I always switch them to mono and just have one dead set mono kick in the middle, and like I say, quite a lot of the time I'll have the bass as mono as well. So we've got a mono auxiliary open. Let me just see what I would tend to use on here. Again, vintage warmer, because it just adds that special kind of something to a track. Set as is, just the default setting, which is just a slight amount of drive. For EQing and stuff, it varies. I mean, to be honest, most of the EQing that you're going to want to be able to do, you're going to be able to do from here. If you want a really, really good kind of analog sound, then you can go for the UAD Fairchild, which, to be honest, when I bought it purely for the way it looked. Because look at that. That is just one of the best looking plugins I've ever seen. But again, there's just a standard preset in here called bass. You throw it on and it really does give you so much bite. We're going to go with that one. So we're going to throw that on there as our compressor. And what I always tend to do with basses is I always throw a little bit of reverb or a little bit of delay on them. Not masses of it, not so that it's going to overpower the mix or anything. But I tend to find, like with a bass line like this, I'm just going to remove that automation for the moment. With a bass line like this, you can add a lot of life into it with just something very simple. So I'm just going to go to the bus. I'm just going to add Logic standard echo plugin. We're just going to knock the repeats down to about 10. Dry on 100%, wet probably about 10. And it's almost not noticeable. I mean, it's there, and you can hear it when it's soloed. I'm taking it down to 5. The colour here is like a high pass, low pass filter. So the more you turn it up, the more it takes the bottom out. The more you turn it down, the more it takes the top off. I like it to take a little bit of the bottom off so it reduces the mud. And just that little bit there, I think, just provides a really nice kind of really kind of nice live sound to the bass. Again, mix from the bottom up. Logic gives you 2 settings as well of how you want to read your faders. You can read them as decibels, which is kind of like the standard, or you can read them as numbers. I always have mine set on numbers because it's a bit like the decibels thing is good, but when you've got things on numbers, it's really easy to kind of match everything up when you're mixing things down. So I can just say, okay, I've got this one at 90, I've got this one at 65, I've got this one at whatever, and I just find it you kind of you can get really sort of really accurate with your settings. So I'm just going to unsolo those now. Just bring the mix into check on here. we're going to bring up the ES1. And again, as I said before, panning is really important, even if it's just a little bit. So what I tend to do is you'll find that aside from my basic things like bass and drums, I'm always going to move things a little bit. So even if it's just like moving this to the side a little bit there, and then opening up the piano, and I'm going to push the piano over that side. Just so that the stereo spread is good. Strings, I'm going to move quite far over there. And again, with these, you can hear the reverb's a little bit muddy because it's kind of like just kind of like over the whole thing, so I'm just going to put an EQ on. There's a great setting. It's one of the things you find with Logic is a lot of the stuff is very WYSIWYG, you know, it's kind of what you see is what you get, and everything's named perfectly. So here there's just one called Add Brightness, and all that does is just roll a little bit of bottom end off and puts a little bit of top end on, so it makes the sound brighter. I normally elaborate on that by putting a low pass set to about 6 or 12 dB. We can go 12 on this one, and just really takes from the bottom end out. But you can find that that is a lot brighter than that. Just that extra little bit of air. And then finally we're going to bring the Korg in as well. Now when you're using off-board gear, obviously you have to render everything in. But the great thing about Logic is it provides you with a really simple way of doing that. It lets you run your external gear almost as if it were a plug-in. So you've got this little thing called external, which lets you use it as a channel strip. So you just set your channel strip to solo. When I'm rendering stuff off, I always put an empty bar before and an empty bar afterwards. That allows for a little bit of release time as the part ends, and it also means that if for some reason you've got kind of like an odd latency thing going on, or you know you've got a little bit of say the note starts before the beat or whatever, it just gives you a nice clear cut for your samples. So I'm just going to take the delay off that we put on. Hit the bounce button. Remember, when you're bouncing hardware stuff, you've got to bounce in real time, not offline, because otherwise it won't work. It'll just come out of silence. Korg R3 pad, and that's going to record all of our automation on there as well. Still using no mastering plugins on here though, because obviously I don't want that to affect the sound. I'm going to leave these on because we're quite happy with those anyway. It sounds nice. When you're doing these, when you're rendering stuff off as well, it's good to take like 2 takes of everything, because the first take has normally got the kind of the initial key press, and then after that the kind of like the sound gets into its groove. So sometimes you'll get like a sound that's really harsh the first time you press it, and then the next time you change it's quite soft. The soft one's the one that you probably want. So if you take a number of takes, I'll just import this back in now. You can have it set so that it automatically imports things in, but as I said, I do everything the same way as I used to do on Logic 5.5, so for some reason, even though it's easier, I do it by hand, which just makes me a bit of a mentalist. Always normalise your samples, which I believe was a video tip that I gave you on the video from ADE. But you can see, I mean, like the difference, although it means I've got to mix it back into the thing to get the volumes right, back into the arrangements, you can see straight away you've got a much clearer waveform. It's going to be at its maximum velocity. And also one of the things to do is with something like this, it's better to normalise each channel as well, because I'm running this as stereo into there, but there's a good chance that I haven't got the left and right exactly matched up, because you can see one side's slightly bigger than the other. So it's better to do that in an external sample editor. So I'm just going to save this off. I tend to use Peak Pro. I haven't got the new version yet. I read a review in a certain magazine. It looks good. If anyone wants to send me any free software, by the way, might as well put the plea out there while you're here. Yeah, I'm on the 5.2 version of this. Absolutely brilliant piece of software. Let's just open this up. So I'm going to just highlight one side of the waveform first and normalise that, and then the other side, which should already be normalised anyway, but we're just going to double check. Yeah, you see there was no movement. And then also I'm just going to remove the DC as well. I'm not exactly sure what DC stands for, which is really bad, but I do know what it sounds like, and it gives you a really kind of off-centre sound. It can make things sound really hollow if the DC is all out of whack. So I always do that to all my samples. It's a little bit time consuming, but you tend to find you don't get any problems when you get to mastering stage. You can see just exactly how much delay, by the way, there is, how much delay there is on the from the MIDI. There's the start of the bar there, and there's the start of the actual notes. So it's quite a hefty chunk. So I'm just going to pull the bottom of that in to here. And then, as I say, I always take two takes. So I'm going to pull this to the start of the first one, and just drop that on the start of the bar. But then I'm going to loop the second take rather than the first one, because the second one's going to sound a lot more comfortable. Again, you'll see that overhanging slightly there. So I'm going to use the event float, which I always keep opened up here, just to pull that back to naught. So that will give us a really tight finishing point on the sample. Copy that back, and then we should just be able to mix that in now. Take solo off.